a woman condemned to cry for eternity. Who is La Llorona really? Stay with us to discover the untold story of this terrifying legend. Legend has it that many years ago, during the time of the conquest, there was a woman whose cry has echoed through the centuries. Her name was Susana, daughter of a Spanish father and an indigenous mother. She was a beautiful woman, but behind her smile hid a mystery that captivated everyone. Susana fell in love with a Spanish nobleman named Santiago. Together they had 3 children, but never married. Santiago, ashamed of Susana's indigenous origin, preferred to marry another woman, unleashing anger and pain in Susana's heart. What happened next transformed Susana into the terrifying figure known as La Llorona. What drove her to such an extreme? What is the true origin of her eternal lament? Don't miss the outcome of this chilling story, because at the end we will show real testimonies of people who claim to have seen her. During the time of the conquest in Mexico, a land full of conflict and miscegenation, there was an exceptionally beautiful woman named Susana. Daughter of a Spanish father and an indigenous mother, Susana possessed a mystery in her smile that captivated all who met her. Her beauty was so captivating that it was said that even the conquistadors were left breathless upon seeing her. Among the conquistadors, Susana met Santiago, a high-born Spanish nobleman whose arrogance was only surpassed by his charm. Despite the social and cultural differences that separated them, the attraction between them was undeniable. Their relationship began in secret, a clandestine romance that defied the norms of the time. Susana and Santiago met in hidden places, far from prying eyes, to live out their forbidden love.
Also, siden at Satan was so high, hadn't as how that here for an hour. Dom I do from a pitch, and the sinner tower, they have our prayers to fathers, Fiho Dolvef. He will hunt my says.
However, Santiago's love for Susana was not enough to overcome his prejudices. Despite Susana's pleas and unconditional love, Santiago never agreed to marry her. The reason was simple but devastating: her indigenous origin. Santiago, ashamed of what he considered an impure bond, feared the disapproval of his family and Spanish society. Every time Susana mentioned marriage, Santiago evaded the subject with excuses and empty promises. This constant denial became a source of deep pain for Susana. Sadness and disappointment took hold of her, but her love for Santiago kept her in this stormy relationship. Her nights were filled with tears, and her days with a hope that never materialized. Meanwhile, Santiago tried to keep up appearances before society, hiding his relationship with Susana and presenting himself as an honorable nobleman. The tension in their relationship intensified with each passing day, becoming a time bomb that was about to explode. Susana, torn between her love and the pain of betrayal, began to lose hope for a future together. The story of Susana and Santiago is a reflection of the internal and external conflicts of the time. A love that, despite its intensity, was doomed by the prejudices and social norms of the conquest. How far would Susana go to fight for her love? And how would this fight affect her own destiny and that of her children? As time passed, the relationship between Susana and Santiago became increasingly strained. Santiago, under pressure from his family and society, decided to marry another woman of the same social status. The news of Santiago's wedding reached Susana's ears like a sharp knife, unleashing a storm of anger and despair in her heart. She could not believe that the man she loved, the father of her children, was completely abandoning her. The night before the wedding, Susana locked herself in her room, sobbing inconsolably. Tears fell incessantly as she remembered the happy moments she had shared with Santiago and her children. Santiago's betrayal tore at her soul, transforming her love into an insatiable rage. Every tear that fell fueled the fire of her anger and despair. The image of Santiago marrying another woman became became an obsession she could not ignore. As preparations for the wedding were underway, Susana, completely broken and full of determination, decided to face Santiago one last time. She dressed in a wedding dress she had kept in hope for years, covering her face with a white veil to hide her pain. Her heart was pounding as she made her way to the church, driven by a mixture of love, anger, and despair. Arriving at the church, Susana blended in with the guests, unrecognizable thanks to the veil covering her face. Every step she took towards Santiago filled her with a dark and powerful energy. When she finally saw him, standing next to his future wife, her fury reached its peak. Santiago seemed happy, completely oblivious to the torment he had caused Susana. In an act of desperation and madness, Susana advanced towards Santiago, her hands shaking with rage. The love she once felt for him had transformed into an insatiable need for revenge. Standing before him, she embraced him as if it were the last time, and in that moment, with a swift and determined movement, she stabbed him in the back. A single stab was enough to take his life, to vent his fury and avenge his abandonment. Santiago's scream echoed through the church as blood stained Susana's wedding dress. The horrified guests fled in panic, leaving Susana alone with Santiago's lifeless body. In her heart, fury was beginning to mix with immense sadness and regret. The woman who was once full of love was now consumed by despair and pain, marking the beginning of her transformation into La Llorona. The wedding day arrived, and the hacienda was filled with guests, flowers, and music. The celebration seemed perfect, but in Susana's heart, fury and despair mixed in an unstoppable whirlwind. Dressed as a bride and with her face covered by a white veil, Susana approached the church unrecognized. Each step she took brought her closer to Santiago, the man who had betrayed her love and destroyed her life. In the midst of the celebration, Susana made her way through the guests, her heart pounding. The music and laughter seemed far away, like a distant echo in her mind. When she finally reached Santiago, she saw him standing next to his future wife, smiling and oblivious to the torment he had caused. The sight of Santiago, happy and carefree, lit a spark of anger in Susana, transforming her pain into lethal determination. In an instant of fury and desperation, Susana approached Santiago and hugged him as if it were the last time. With a quick and determined movement, she pulled out a hidden knife and stabbed him in the back. A single fatal stab was enough to take her life. Santiago's heart-wrenching scream echoed throughout the hacienda, silencing the music and laughter. Blood stained Susana's wedding dress, and Santiago's body fell to the ground, limp. Susana's vengeance was swift and lethal, culminating in an act of desperation that left everyone present in shock. The guests were filled with horror upon discovering the truth, recoiling in panic as Susana stood, bloody knife in hand. Susana's soul sank further into madness, consumed by grief and regret. The image of Susana, dressed as a bride and covered in blood, was etched into the memories of all present. The woman who was once full of love and hope was now a tragic and terrifying figure, marked by revenge and despair. This final act of violence sealed her fate, transforming her into the legend of La Llorona, a woman condemned to cry for eternity. Desperate and consumed by grief, Susana not only ended Santiago's life, but also that of her own children, taking their breath away in a fit of madness. Desperation and guilt led her to commit this final, tragic act, which transformed Susana into a figure of legend, La Llorona. Since that day, it is said that La Llorona wanders the banks of rivers, lakes, and forests, crying for her children and for the life she lost. Her cry, full of regret and pain, echoes in the darkest nights, terrifying those who hear it. The figure of a woman dressed in white, her face covered by a veil, has become a symbol of sadness and despair. The legend of La Llorona has endured throughout the centuries, passed down from generation to generation. It is said that her spirit cannot find rest due to the guilt she feels for having taken the lives of her own children. Her crying, heard on the quietest of nights, is a constant reminder of her tragic fate. Accounts of encounters with La Llorona are numerous and varied. Some say they have seen her walking along the banks of rivers, her white dress floating in the air, and her crying echoing in the darkness. Others claim to have felt her presence in the woods, where her crying mixes with the whisper of the wind. La Llorona has become a feared and respected figure, a warning of the dangers of regret and despair. Susana's transformation into La Llorona is a testament to how grief and guilt can consume a person, leading them to commit unthinkable acts. Her story is a reminder of the consequences of our actions and how love and hate can intertwine in destructive ways. The legend of La Llorona lives on in Mexican culture, an echo of a tragic past that still resonates in the present. The legend of La Llorona has endured throughout the centuries, with numerous testimonies from people who claim to have seen her. These terrifying accounts describe encounters with a ghostly woman, dressed in white, who cries inconsolably at night. Her crying, filled with pain and regret, has become an unmistakable sound for those who have had the misfortune of encountering her. Some accounts tell of La Llorona appearing near rivers and lakes, where her spirit searches for the children she lost. The descriptions match: an ethereal figure, with a white dress floating in the air and a veil covering her face. Her presence brings with it a feeling of cold and indescribable terror, leaving witnesses paralyzed with fear. Other encounters with La Llorona have taken place in forests and lonely roads. Witnesses claim to have seen her figure passing through the trees, her crying echoing in the darkness. Those who have had the courage to follow her cry have been met with her empty, desperate gaze, a sight they can never forget. Some believe that La Llorona is just a myth, a story created to scare children and keep traditions alive. However, others are convinced of her existence, based on their own experiences and the testimonies of those who have survived an encounter with her. The legend of La Llorona has been passed down from generation to generation, becoming an integral part of Mexican culture and a reflection of the pain and despair that can consume a person. These stories of encounters with La Llorona are not only scary, but they also keep the memory of Susana and her tragic transformation alive. At the end of this video, we will present real testimonies of people who claim to have seen La Llorona. Their accounts will allow you to delve even deeper into this terrifying legend and decide for yourself whether La Llorona is just a myth or a spooky reality. Throughout this video, we have explored the tragic story of Susana and her transformation into La Llorona. The legend of La Llorona is a reminder of the pain and regret that can transcend time and space. If you ever hear her crying in the night, remember the story behind those cries. Do you have any experiences with La Llorona? Tell us in the comments your stories, and don't forget to subscribe for more scary tales. Give the video a like and share it with your friends. And don't miss our next video where we'll explore another chilling legend.